The Sound of Damian Wayne. Written by Magnoliabee. Read to you by Evie is Evil. Chapter 5. The days dragged on in a decidedly detestable manner, from Damian's viewpoint. They were broken up by sparse dinners and nights spent hunched over his painting. He turned his bedroom into an art studio of sorts, and as Alfred had not said anything yet, he continued to work there. He enjoyed the comfort it brought him. There was never a disappointment to find it empty, as that was its natural state without him inside. The week was a haul till Friday, when the gala would be held. He hated attending such things, and usually his father let him get out of it by claiming illness or prior plans. But he couldn't always skip, and so this would be another occasion of indignities. He hated the way his cheeks would be pinched, the obtuse questions asked by socialites fishing for gossip, as if he would be immature enough to mention anything pertinent to them. And, worst of all, the treatment he got from his father and brother, as if he would simply massacre the whole room at a moment's notice. He found the portrait to be coming along quite well. The shading and colors were used appropriately, and all blended nicely. He was nearly done, in fact, but hadn't mentioned it to Miss Liesel. Damian planned to just leave it on her desk, and he knew she would understand it was from him. Mrs. Briggs continued to be a thorn in his side, however, which made his school like a minefield to navigate. She kept on attempting to talk to him, growing more insistent as he routinely failed to submit any work. He knew some of his grades were slipping, but really, it was only in specific classes. Math and PE were normal as always, though his scores in science and history had definitely seen better days. His suggested visits with Dr. Dahlman were not helping this in his mind, as he was reminded by Mrs. Briggs that he could sit with the man at least every day, it seemed. His lack of communication was clearly a point of discussion for the teachers at his school, with even Miss Liesel giving him extra attention. And yet, with all of this he had to dodge at school, the switch when he got home was stark. Cass had finally returned. He had to hear offhandedly from Tim at a rare night he sat at the table, but she was roped up with some case with Steph, and so hadn't come by. It did not seem as if anyone was picking up too much on his date. Alfred definitely had, with the odd looks he sent Damian's way, but he clearly deemed it unimportant, as his father's behavior had yet to change, suggesting it had not yet been brought up to him. And that was to be expected, really. What more could he ask for than a seat at the table? It was his problem anyway. His mistake, his failure, decision, and choice. All of it. And so, he kept his head down. And perhaps that was why he missed the stray glances Tim shot his way, or the slight frown he received from his father as he silently gathered up his dishes and left after barely eating. He did not listen as they spoke behind him, muffled by the walls. "What's up with him?" "I do not know." He eyed the painting carefully, taking a step back to fully view his work. Damian had worked on it for many hours now, toiling over it as he threw his all into this childish work, this dream, this fantasy that he did not have access to, did not know, would not. But it felt real as he stared at the smiling version of his father before him. The gleam in his eyes was so bright, and more similar to his public persona than anything. He felt this to be a positive thing. At least he was reinforcing the idea, aiding his family in some way, even if it truly was not needed. It still at least was something he was doing, as he bided his time, waiting for the witch to make a reappearance. She plagued his every thought, taunting him in dreams and at the tip of his tongue. He still had no clue how she had managed to grab such a book. He knew she had to have been on the run, as her behavior was poor, and the death grip she had held on that dreaded spellbook was nearly animalistic. He shook his head, turning his focus back to the painting. Truly, there was nothing more to add. They, his family members, were lifelike, to where he almost felt like he was at the table with them. It was like a mirror, in a sense, into a realm he wished to enter and reside in. He knew it would be perfect for the art show, as it promoted family values, something Gotham Academy loved to push. Rather surprising when they considered so many of the students barely saw their parents, often gone on business trips and the like. The painting meant something to him. It was almost too realistic, making him, in a childish way, dissatisfied with the real relationships he held with his family. Tense as they were, he couldn't help the way he continued to wish for change. "Damian, this is beautiful!" He stared awkwardly off to the side as she marveled at his work, not knowing what to do. It hadn't been on purpose that Miss Liesel had seen him place the canvas, but now he realized it was probably for the best, as he was not getting out of her praises. It would be more embarrassing to receive them in full view of his peers if she approached him in class. It had already been difficult enough to avoid Alfred seeing his painting, having to carefully wrap it in loose white canvas. The butler had eyed it, but said nothing to him, which he was quietly grateful for. "Truly just the emotions!" She gestured to the faces. "I feel like I've really joined your family for dinner." She paused, her energy diminishing slightly as she scanned the picture as if searching. "Oh, but where are you?" She glanced at him with a concerned expression. "Why haven't you joined them? Are you in the room?" "Somewhere," he replied, and the bruise came quickly. His voice was slightly scratchy from disuse, and he wondered if he was imagining things, or if the pain he felt was mounting each passing day. His body was becoming increasingly battered, the aches in his gait insistent. Every day he glanced in the mirror as he spotted a new, dark bruise. He was on the very beginning bend of looking mildly sickly, as he had surely lost a bit of weight in the past days. Damian wondered if the bruises would even fade after the spell was undone. He feared he'd be left in his current state. Miss Liesel did not say anything to his response, but she narrowed her eyes slightly, her brows furrowed. Her gaze was hard on the painting, focused on the image of his father. He quirked a brow at her odd behavior, but said nothing. "It's wondrous, Damian, truly." She carefully lifted the canvas, carrying it to place it behind her desk. "I'll hang it up the night of. You should be very proud of yourself." He didn't feel very proud, not when he'd been the cause of everything, but she did not need nor want to hear that, and he simply tilted his head before leaving for his class as he dropped it off in the morning, so fewer people would see him. When he returned home that day, ready to begin his weekend, it felt more like the start of boredom and misery. This feeling was not helped as Alfred instructed him to pick out his best suit. He had been aware that the gala was that day. He'd held on to the hope that he would miraculously be excused from attendance, but it was admittedly an unrealistic notion. Damian had already missed 5 or so that year, and he was due for an appearance in high society. He stared at the clothes in his closet, trying to decide which one was the plainest. He figured that a nice dark suit would help him blend in better with the crowd. Normally, he would find himself an alcove to tuck into and bunker down for the night. At that moment, he was thankful for the habit, as it would not be out of character for him to do it once more. Maybe he would grab some food from a passing waiter. Overall, his goal was to avoid unnecessary interactions. Unfortunately, this was often rather difficult to achieve in Gotham's upper crust. He descended the staircase, tugging slightly at his tie. It always felt itchy, too stuffy. Truly, it would be a hazard if he had to engage in some sort of combat. He wondered absent-mindedly that perhaps he could somehow hide some sort of weapon in it, but seeing as Alfred did the laundry, it was highly likely that he'd be chastised for cutting a hole in it. Still, the reprimand was not too much of a turn-off, and he still considered the idea. His father and brother were waiting, which was not surprising. Tim was adjusting his watch obnoxiously, and Bruce was staring at his phone, clearly preoccupied. What was unusual, however, was the appearance of his sister. Cass smiled at him, waving slightly. She sported a simple dark dress, and altogether they collectively looked rather vampiric in his mind. Steph was not there, but she was not one for the socialite lifestyle. He was jealous of her a bit, without obligation to engage in the general idiocracy that he was forced into. She always liked to brag to them all about what she did while they were at some boring gala or publicity event. Commonly, it involved her going to some sort of fast food establishment and getting into general nonsense. She had a proclivity for the action. It was hardly a shock to Damian when he noted that once more Dick was not there. He couldn't blame the man. If there was anything he would choose to miss, it would be galas. And it wasn't as if he could end this feud with Bruce so soon, especially just for such an event. He still felt like he was being left alone, however, because he knew how this would turn out. Bruce would begin to chat with random men and women, pretending to get increasingly drunk as the night went on. Tim would use the opportunity to gather intel or promote Wayne enterprises, and was even known to snag prosperous business deals on occasion. Cass was a bit more similar to himself, usually sticking to the sides of the party. But she also had a habit of sneaking out early, and no one gave her any trouble for it. Damian did not have the same graces bestowed upon him. He did not possess the same charms as many of those in his family. There have been many times when he caused an outburst after saying something considered too violent or slapping a hand away from his face. He did not understand why he was in trouble in such moments. His reactions were well deserved in his mind. He did not provoke anybody to justify their behavior, and yet they still continued to demean him and treat him as if he were a small child. And he was just expected to go along with it, to permit such grievances. He hardly thought it fair. Why should he be treated in such a manner? The people attending galas were usually brought up with good manners, supposedly. Why they did not extend their learning to himself, he remained unaware. "Hello, little brother," Cass greeted him with an easy grin, reaching down to pat his head as he approached her. He brushed her hands off and turned to look at his father, who finally lifted his head up from his phone. "If everyone's ready, we can head out now," he sighed as he said. "And let's try to be civil. I don't want any tabloids running anything too libelous this time." "He's talking about you," Tim remarked, obviously wanting to goad Damian. It would be tempting to take the bait and let out some frustration, but surely not worthy of the many different kinds of repercussions he'd face. "Tim." Bruce put a hand to his head as if it were ailing him. "Not tonight, please." His father seemed to be in a particularly poor mood, and Damian knew to stay clear of him tonight. Not that he followed him around anyway, as he was usually brushed off and instructed to pass the time with the many young and oafish children dragged along by their parents. They never turned out well for him, as he had little in common with the children of the elite. Their interests and upbringing did not align with his own. Still, on many occasions, he'd been accosted into spending time with an ill-behaved classmate of his. Normally, this was due to their parents wanting to be in good graces with the Wayne family, which he found to be an insulting concept. Why would Damian have any sway in such relations? A ridiculous idea that nearly made him want to laugh. He was no representative. That acquired years of life that he had not yet attained. He did not hold respect in the household to any extent, as much as he had struggled for it in his first year. Tim sidled up next to Cass, and the two began to discuss the mission she had been on. Something to do with an alien planet was all he managed to get. Not that he was really listening in too closely. It seemed typical, anyhow. He did not think he would ever get used to the flashing cameras and jeers to turn his face, as he kept his head down and followed his family down the red carpet. Gala events were often overly publicized, in his opinion. What was interesting about a gathering of Gotham's elite, gossiping and attempting to one-up each other, with loud boasts of their newest purchases, was lost on him. While attending such events helped save face, they also had some tangible benefits, admittedly. Mainly, the transfer of intel surrounding more illegal enterprises. His father was certain Damian would be able to learn more because, as the adults around him drank, they were supposedly much more likely to let slip anything more nefarious in his presence on the assumption that he would not comprehend what they were discussing. "Damian, over here!" one woman called out. Her hair pulled back so tightly, he was surprised she was even able to contort her face to spit out words. Her camera was flashing at a rapid rate. "Look over here!" He felt like some sort of circus animal. He pulled his suit jacket more taut in a vain attempt to shield himself from the camera shutters. Bruce, to the untrained eye, appeared to be eating up the attention. He waved with a disarming smile, flashing his teeth at the paparazzi. A flurry of cameras went off at the action, nearly blinding Damian. He wished he could wear sunglasses. One man walked up to his father and began attempting to sweet-talk him into signing a business contract. Damian's father had already been pulled away before they had even entered the gala. It was being held in the city's capital, a stately building that had seen one too many villain attacks. Ivy crept up the white pillars, the doors dwarfing all who entered. He's not certain why they even bother rebuilding at this point. Online government could reasonably work, and was less likely to attract certain villainous characters. He sighed to himself as he walked inside, resigning himself to a night of ill treatment. This was proven true quite quickly, as he was immediately barraged by a few older women, who somehow already seemed tipsy. "Oh, Eve, look, it's Brucey's youngest!" He shied away from the hand trying to clumsily pat his face. "You're just adorable, aren't you? Spitting image, I say." One of the women was wearing a large and garish brooch, with gold ornate detailing of what seemed to be some sort of animal, but she clasped her hand over it before he could get a better look. "Very precious indeed. How's school?" She chuckled as she spoke. She reeked in a distinctive manner similar to Jason. Cigarettes, or for her, more likely cigars. The scent mixed with her overly floral perfume forced him to hold his breath as she spoke. "Does Bruce even send his kids to normal schools? I bet they have private tutors." The previous woman chimed in, her face rosy. "They're all so smart. Damon, what's your favorite subject?" He ignored the blatantly incorrect pronunciation of his name in favor of shrugging his shoulders. That would be the least suspicious answer, he decided. Silent acknowledgement. "Recess, if I had to guess." All the women laughed, and he once more dodged a hand. "I'm certain you're a little heartbreaker. All the girls must be smitten." Not his favorite comment to receive, but he took it in stride. He could appreciate being deemed similar to his father, even if, in reality, that was far from the truth. The chandelier sputtered above them, flickering slightly. The woman with the brooch glared up at it. "Now what is wrong with the electricity in this city? They can't be bothered to fix it, I suppose." A boisterous laugh caught their attention, heads turning over to where his father was entertaining a small group of people. His drink was sloshing in his hands as he made dramatic gestures, no doubt telling some made-up story of a trip he never went on. The crowd seemed enthralled, one woman leaning on his arm with a captivated expression on her face. "It's your father! Well, girls, we must be saying hello," said the woman he believed to be Eve. "It was so nice seeing you. I must say, you're much more behaved than the rumors suggested." He slipped away as the group hurried over to his father's side. The gala seemed to already be in full swing, with most invitees already having arrived. He wasn't certain who was hosting this time around. Not that it really mattered to him. Usually, they were held under the guise of charity, though more accurately, an excuse for the elites to party. Damian bobbed and weaved under arms and through the throngs of people, making his way to one of the side staircases. He snagged a piece of bruschetta from a waiter's platter as he hurried up the steps. From the second-story balconies overlooking the entire party, the people below merely looked like glistening trinkets. The whirl of color popping out from more fashionably dressed socialites, mixed in with the more subdued looks of most, to make a vivid scene. He nearly had the urge to paint what he saw. He flitted through the Gotham news on his phone, taking a bite of his bruschetta every few minutes or so. He hadn't seen any mention or indication of the witch, and he was getting nervous. Maybe she really had fled. Though, if he thought about it, it seemed likely she would have stayed. Why else would she cast such a spell? It seemed reasonable to assume that meant she had plans to hunker down. His eyes flicked upwards again, glancing at the party. He spotted Tim, who had a wine glass in his hand, with a drink he definitely wasn't legally allowed to have, schmoozing with some woman. Damian rolled his eyes at the scene before his breath caught as he took a closer look. She looked tall, which perhaps was bolstered by Tim's vertically challenged self, with auburn hair stuffed into a large bun that suggested she had quite a lot of it. When she smiled, it was off-putting, not real or convincing. And what truly sealed the deal for him was when he swore her eyes turned white for just a second, when Tim had turned away to hand his empty glass to a waiter. He inhaled sharply at what he was seeing. Tim was fraternizing with the enemy. Even if he did not know she was the enemy, it was still offensive in his mind, and clearly it was up to Damian to correct such a mistake. He stuffed the rest of his snack into his mouth and quickly darted down the steps. He spotted Cass making her way towards the bathroom, where there was a very nicely placed window, just waiting for someone to sneak out of. It was tempting to join her, but he had a duty. Tim was smiling awkwardly at the woman as she laughed a bit too hard at something clearly not very amusing. "A car? I could just imagine the look on your father's face." She held her side as if she feared it would split open. "You are just hilarious, Wayne. Simply." Damian glared as he approached the two, until he was right by them. Tim noticed him first and raised his eyebrows a bit, as his shoulders relaxed slightly. He knew that look. Tim planned to use him as a way to get out of the conversation. "Ah, Damian. Just who I wanted to see." His voice didn't inflect enough for Tim to believe him. Tim stepped aside to force Damian in closer. "He's my little brother, Miss Melina." Her voice was suddenly flat, as if her fun had been spoiled. She hadn't spared a glance at Damian, instead staring off with glazed-over eyes. "You know, I think I'll go grab a drink." She turned to walk past Damian, but quickly halted in her tracks. Her eyes widened as she looked down at him. A cruel smile flashed on her face, then gone as quickly as it had appeared, to be replaced with a new, serene expression. "It is so nice to meet you, Damian. I feel like we've met before. Perhaps in Paris?" She hummed to herself. "Or Rome? Surely not Stockholm. Maybe it was here. In Gotham." His blood boiled as she spoke, her voice listless, as if what she was saying truly did not matter to her. And it didn't. She was taunting him, as she had obviously recognized the spell on him. He wasn't certain how that worked, but magic was not exactly his forte. Out of all of them, he'd argue Jason had the most experience, but he wasn't exactly much help in general. "I never pegged you as being shy, but we all have our quirks." She inspected her nails as she spoke, as if it was all beneath her. Tim glared at her, stepping slightly in front of Damian, as if he were enacting some sort of defense. Damian had nothing to do. He couldn't apprehend her, or even alert the others to her presence at the moment. She was in an open room full of people. There was no telling what havoc she could create. She had no good reason to make an appearance, and had a similar lack of purpose to be speaking with Tim of all people. Her smile grew as she watched him, calculating. "Well, it doesn't matter. You Wayne boys, have fun. I hope to speak with you all again soon." Tim stared after her, a crease on his forehead as he finally turned back to Damian. The hum of a string quartet was distant, mixing with the mindless chatter of the people surrounding them. "Wow, she's weird." He fiddled with his lapel as Damian crossed his arms. "Sorry to drag you in there, but thanks for saving me." She would not let up. I don't even know what she wanted. She just kept talking. Damian huffed, watching the woman, Melina, because surely that was not her real name, weave effortlessly through the groups of people to slip away deep into the crowd. She had been turning her head from side to side, as if following something imperceptible. Tim sighed. Look, I don't know what I did, but you can't just go silent on me. He brushed his fingers through his hair, messing up the gel he had no doubt painstakingly administered only a few hours earlier. Kind of immature. Just tell me the problem and I don't know, apologize? Unless it's a dumb reason, I guess. He seemed to be floundering, which was hardly surprising, given his knack for poorly executed ploys against Damian. Tim did not truly care. His issue was that Damian's attitude was causing larger issues for the overall sanctity of the family. And of course he, in all his hubris, had noticed the silence, but assumed it was only directed at him. Tim truly could not get creative with his brainstorming when it came to Damian. When Damian did not respond again, Tim groaned and proceeded to clap a hand on Damian's back. Hey, he began, and was promptly taken aback as Damian couldn't help but wince. He'd hit him right on one of his bruises, a particularly angry one, from when he'd alerted Steph to the gunman. Damian whipped his head around to glare at Tim, who had his hands raised in a defensive position. Chill out, I didn't even know you were hurt there. He narrowed his eyes at Damian, as if piecing something together. Did you get injured on that patrol? I thought you said you were fine. Damian pushed him away, shouldering past to search for the witch. Tim let out a loud complaint behind him, but he paid it no mind, as he often did. It shouldn't have stung as much as it did to hear such a statement come out of Tim's mouth. He had noticed the change, but he would rather assume the worst of Damian's behavior, the worst of his intent. It shouldn't hurt this much to be ignored. It shouldn't feel like confirmation. He felt his eyes sting, and he quickly wiped them, ashamed. It wasn't the curse and the bruises that had pained him the most. It was the dawning realization that maybe, deep down, they never wanted to hear him. And that is the end of Chapter 5. Author's Notes. I'm trying to write Damian as an unreliable narrator, so hopefully that's getting across and explains why some people, Tim, seem perhaps mean sometimes. Hopefully no one comes across as too out of character, but that's sometimes how it goes, admittedly. Not sorry for the last line. The angst potential was too good. And reader's notes from me? Nothing really. Thanks for listening, and bye!